Welcome to our January edition of Ball Fields and Blackboards. We're starting a whole new era. Since 2019, we've been doing audio podcasts. We decided to take the plunge into the video world. And if you haven't been joining us, let me give just a little bit of background. I'm retired, but we've been professors in the Western Kentucky University Business School, economics and marketing. And we've all done work, not just teaching, but research in terms of various aspects of sports. And additionally, especially these two guys here, Craig Martin and Dennis Wilson, have other connections to the sports world, whether playing or administration. I won't get into the details of it. My only experience really is as a very mediocre high school football player in a very big program in Texas, but I wasn't very good. But I've been an athlete over the years, again, very mediocre. And so that we do have, I just say those things to say, I think we have a variety of perspectives. We were into sports statistics before it was known as sports analytics, but we've been fans, we've been observers, analysts, and so this month.
Now, I just want to be fair here.
Go ahead.
You were one of the pioneers of sports economics as a field, and you and others were on the front end of this. So I don't downplay yourself here as like, I was a mediocre athlete or something. Like, okay, your expertise goes far beyond ours other than...
Well, at least Dennis understands the script here. He stepped in right where I needed him to.
Well, you're building me up, and all I did was marry into something, as it turns out. So,
but I mean, look, all of us have done, when I say academic work, some substantial stuff, and some of it has been probably from a fan's perspective a bit esoteric, but a lot of it has been what in other ways would now be part of the sports analytics world. We were always given a little bit more academic spin because you had to get it in academic journals. But and that's really been what podcast is, sort of this meeting ground between academic and fan perspectives. Maybe we go more for fan perspective sometimes.
Most definitely.
Yeah, but... So
and wait till you hear our betting advice.
Well, yeah, that's my other channel I'm starting.
Yeah, we're going to have to make sure that doesn't creep into this.
How to turn a small pile of money into a smaller pile of money.
I would say too. We generally try to keep this pretty light-hearted. We're not this. I think our new catchphrase may be intelligent sports analysis without the drama. I don't know how intelligent, but now Dennis and I, once in a while, we can get a little drama, but
I should be sitting between you two.
Yes,
make it more appropriate.
Well, the college football playoffs are at the center of the sports world these days, and we're going to be speaking about things that are happening tonight and tomorrow night, the semifinals.
Yeah, this is like the greatest weekend if you're a football fan.
Oh, man.
So you got the semifinals and then the first round of the NFL playoffs this weekend. So what's that, a total of 6 games that are, or whatever, I don't know.
Be 6 NFL games.
Yeah, 6 NFL games and 2 college games.
I need to send my wife off to her family for the weekend. Except they live here, so I don't know. One of the big stories is, you might describe it as the fall of the Titans in Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. 3 of the teams that have dominated the college football playoffs for the past 15 years, they're out. And, a couple of them didn't look very good going out. And so one of the questions I want to begin with, is this a one-off or is this the new normal?
Oh, I think NIL has made this the new normal. I think I don't know who the new Titans are going to be. That's yet to be determined, but I think the old Titans are now playing a different game. The game has changed, and their comparative advantage they had is now lessened tremendously whenever the size of the check written by somebody else can be equal to or bigger than yours.
Well, let me put, and you this kind of segues into my question, follow up, is that, I think for many people, they would have thought, well, this is only going to make the rich richer. That the programs that have been successful, they can now just be more successful. Why is it stirring the pot rather than just doubling down on the Titans?
I think there are more richers. I think you're at a point right now where you said the rich get richer. I think was a possibility until they realized, well, your second tier SEC schools and your second tier Big Ten schools are now rich as well. And we're placing a cap of $20 million on the revenue sharing that schools can spend unless you have other NIL sources, which there are others out there. But that cap is basically leveling the playing field for 50, 60 schools out there who are going to try and pay that $20 million. So being able to hoard players at one school is not as much of an option anymore because there are other schools out there who can pay more or have that opportunity. And the transfer portal has fed into that. I mean, I can leave every year and go someplace else hoping that I get a bigger check.
Well, and the other part of this is I don't even think it just evens up the ground. I think it changes it so much that who's actually on top, meaning the rich get richer, but now you've changed the game and now you don't know who the rich are. So, well, yeah, it may seem like the Ohio States and Alabamas and Georgias of the world are the rich, and they probably are. It turns out there's some others that you thought were rich that might not be as rich as others, and others you thought were poor that might be a lot richer, hence Indiana, Texas Tech. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that Mark Cuban has come out and said, you know, he's an alumnus of Indiana, and he's come out and said, I'm going to make sure that Indiana players are taken care of. Like, okay, that's a game changer. He didn't want to pay it to the university, but paying the players?
Well, you've hit on, I think, where I was got ahead of my own mind on this, and Greg was hitting off this too, and that is, you know, when attracting players is mainly built on reputation and historical winning, well, there are a very small set of schools that have that. Well, all of a sudden, in terms of money, all it takes is a Mark Cuban or whoever the guy is, the funding
the Texas Tech guy has turned that on its head.
There's like 6 of them that have gotten together out there, and they're like, yeah, let's make sure that we're the holy cow.
You know, it is interesting often in sports and even among sports academics, there's, money, you know, makes advantages for a few. It doesn't, it sometimes may work that way, but it doesn't always work that way. Yeah. Money, as you know, the word we like to use in economics is fungible. Money can spread many, many places. Things like reputation, that's a resource that can be kind of hoarded. Alabama has that reputation advantage, but they don't have some huge money advantage. Georgia has money, but it's not like, again, if Mark Cuban gets involved in Indiana, well, all of a sudden that advantage is frittered away.
Well, even that reputation cachet you can have, Oklahoma's figured out we had the reputation, and it's been harder for us. Clemson is facing the exact same thing. USC, they're facing the exact same thing. We've had that reputation as being one of the blue bloods. It's not there anymore. But I don't think high school kids or people in the transfer portal are saying, well, I've got to go to Clemson because it's Clemson.
In some ways this was already working. It didn't seem it. At the very top, again, you had Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State dominating, but underneath that, this was already percolating for the last 30 years in many ways. Just TV had made a difference. Lots of kids were going, well, if I can go start at South Florida as a freshman, why would I go sit on the bench for 2 years at Alabama or Ohio State? And so we'd seen historically the Western Kentuckys of the world were very uncompetitive against mid-tier Power 5 conference teams. But that had been eroded other than right at the very top. Now, this seems to have made a difference at the very top, too.
Yeah. But the idea, I'm sorry, the idea of 10 years ago going to South Florida because I'm the third quarterback at Alabama and I want to play instead of being the third quarterback of Alabama, so I go to South Florida. Well, there's even more incentive now because I go to South Florida for 1 year as a starting quarterback, and then Auburn signs me to a huge NIL deal a year later. So there's almost more of incentive now to do that.
Well, and you hit on something here, and I'm going to flip-flop topics. I want to jump to Trinidad, what's a Chambliss, the Mississippi quarterback.
Yeah.
He's a great example that, again, a lot of attention is paid to, who's got the 4-star recruits, who's got the 5-star recruits. And even after those guys have been in college for 2 or 3 years, people still, he's a 4-star recruit. Well, whatever he was at a high school junior really is not that germane to what he is now. And it amazed me, I wrote you guys, that in the era where there's such extensive scouting of players at young ages and hardly any secrets anymore. I over the years, I've talked about the guy I went to high school with who was this fantastic athlete. But in that era, it just wasn't the same in terms of, he was known in Northeast Texas, but he wasn't widely known other places. But you think about a Trinidad Chambliss. I just saw a piece yesterday. He was a 0-star recruit. He goes to Division II Ferris State. And even there, it's like he's been, we got to get this guy. He winds up in Mississippi thinking he'll be a backup. And they were saying Lane Kiffin at the UK Mississippi game earlier in the season was telling him, this was before their quarterback got hurt, was telling him, hey, you guys, our backup quarterback, you guys need to keep an eye on this guy. Well, it turned out to be quite prophetic. And so I guess partly here, what I'm getting at is how much is there out there? My sense is among a lot of coaches and certainly the media, these star ratings, they're treated as gospel. Again, not just rather than we would view these as error-prone forecast. And certainly, do you guys know of data on how many 4 or 5-star guys really turn into 2-star guys and how many 1, 2, 3-star guys turn into 4-star guys?
Well, I don't know anything specifically along that, but what this clearly sets up with the combination of NIL and the transfer portal and what you're talking about is that the larger schools with the most money need to do the least high school recruiting now. And so what we've set up now is a major league and a minor league system.
Yeah, that's exactly
and so
right.
the second tier, the Western Kentuckys of the world, are going to be the minor league system. They need to be doing the high school recruiting, and 3 and 4-star guys really need to be thinking about coming to the Western Kentuckys and playing for a year, maybe playing for 2 years, and then going into the portal and selling themselves as free agents to wherever to become that guy. And so it not only gives them a chance, but it gives the 1 and 2-star guys, they may get squeezed out here a little bit type thing.
Well, I would say maybe not, because I think you're right. There's a minor major league, but there's a multi-tier minor league. Bailey Zappi is a good example.
Yep.
He starts at Houston Christian. He comes to WKU. And, many of these guys now would then go on to another place. And so Ferris State is, that single A ball. The WKUs are double A, triple A. And then you can move up to, the majors. And so, yeah, the 0-1-star guys, I think there's still going to be a place, but it's at these Division II or FCS schools. But those are places, and Chambliss is a good illustration. There are guys at those places who can really play. Kurt Warner could play before he made it to the
well,
pros.
It's just proof that most of your best, even in basketball and football, most of your best athletes end up in Division II.
Well,
isn't that
not the case?
Isn't that the point what we were talking about?
Craig played
as a D2 athlete.
I was going to say, you mentioned the 5-stars always get the most chances and they continue to transfer. We see the same thing in minor league baseball. Has the same thing. Your top draft picks continually get chances at every level, whereas your 27th level draft pick, they get the one shot to star or to make their case, and they're not giving it much of a chance. And the NFL draft's the same thing. We've talked about that before. Your top picks are consistently given more chances.
That is, look, a portal. We've talked about the portal. I'm not going to highlight it today. There's a lot of chaos, and it's a bit crazy. But one thing that it does, and I think even if it were reigned in a bit, is it does give guys a chance to sort and match. There's in academics we call it a matching problem. Guys who are actually pretty good, but they're in the wrong situation. They're buried beneath two other guys, and the coach won't give them a chance, or they need a guy who can develop their particular skills better. And it is interesting how this switching, allowing guys to move, versus the era where, okay, one, you're going to have to sit out a year unless you're moving from D3 or something, or you've got one shot then if you do sit out a year, where this does give a lot more chance for matching. One of the things I want to bring up and talking about your illustrious career, Craig was a good Indiana high school basketball player, but
he just completely ignored your D2. You were a hell of a high school basketball player, and then you went to college,
which is why I ended up at Division II.
Yeah. But and Dennis had a 3-day college basketball career, right?
Almost.
Yeah.
So.
But both of you guys, from your high school careers would have, and Craig in college, you would have seen there are guys, maybe you would be personally, but guys who at the high school level, you think this guy, he is the it guy, but he's totally maxed out. He has developed about as much as yet other guys who both physically and just skills-wise are still on the upward trend. Do you remember particular guys from your...
I don't know that I could pinpoint any individuals, but I know the idea of leaving a Division II school at that point to go someplace else, whether it's football or basketball, there was such hindrance to do that. You lost a year basically going from a lower level to a higher level in NCAA at that point. You didn't have the transfer portal option. You didn't have that ability
that's
to
why
leave. Right. That's why I never left. But the idea of people doing that, it was only going to be your elite 3 or 4 guys a year who were that good, who were willing to sit out a year to go someplace else and play at a Division I level. It just was unheard of. And now you see that. That's how some of these schools now, especially your group of 6 schools, I guess they're calling them now, that's who they're recruiting. They're going to those schools and saying, basketball, football, who are the best players at that level? That's who we're bringing in to replace the guys that we're losing to the Power 5 schools or Power 4.
Even myself, because I played high school football in Texas, I was aware of guys, both we played against in our area, and then a few guys who were from the state as a whole who were really, really good. Eric Dickerson was a couple years behind me, and here's an example of a guy who was killing it, and he's playing at a small school. I think, well, this guy, or Billy Sims, I was in the 8th grade, and they played a high school playoff game in my stadium. He was at a lower level school, and you realize, you talk about a man above boys. That guy was, I think he ran for 250 yards that night, and he could have run for 450. But at the same time, people wouldn't recognize these names because they fell out. But there were interesting guys who were just, these are all-state, can't miss guys. Some of who went to Houston or other places and had nice college careers, a couple of whom might have had a year or two in pro football. But it is interesting how many of those guys that were just, man, this guy he's a can't miss, well, turn into, good, maybe not great college players, but never turn into pro players. That development path, it's not, in football it might be a little easier than baseball, but still that the idea of who as a junior or senior in high school is really going to be the guy. I mean, Michael Jordan is maybe the classic example, or Tom Brady. I mean, there are both guys who are good that aren't recognized, and guys that seem to be can't miss that don't ever turn into it.
Well, that just goes back to what is it that makes somebody successful at the next level type thing. And you can be a high school superstar by just being athletic. And some of these guys are unbelievably athletic, right, but requires little or no discipline, little or no effort on their behalf. They're just so superior. But that superiority goes away, meaning they might still be superior, but it's not enough to not put in the effort, not put in the discipline, not be driven, not be competitive. And if you don't have those things, then it falls off. And there's some people who aren't as athletic, but have all those other things, and that leads to the development later on. And this is where the tiered system, if you start having some minor league system, some of those guys are going to get sorted out on the downside, right? The 3 and 4 star guys are going to go to the group of 5 type of conference schools, and you're never going to hear from them again because they weren't going to be successful wherever they went because they didn't have the discipline, the determination, the competitiveness. But the other guys that are athletic enough but have all those other attributes, you're going to see them develop, and they're going to be the next people that are, well, what's the guy who just won the Heisman at Indiana, the quarterback,
Mendoza.
Yeah, Mendoza. That he goes from Cal to Indiana and becomes a superstar type thing. Like, again, good, but he's developed into being great by having some other attributes.
Well, you've now segue into the topic I was going to talk about a second, and that is IU. Curt Cignetti, the coach, and what others have referred to as almost this near miracle turnaround from a program that was just historically bad. I mean, historically in a deep historical sense.
Well, if anybody had told us years ago, now because I say it, it's guaranteed it's not going to happen, but that Indiana, Ole Miss might be playing for a national championship in football. Yeah. Again, we're of the age like, come on, man.
Yeah.
I don't even think you have to be the age. 5 years ago, Indiana and Ole Miss playing for a national championship, you would have said that there's no way.
No. So where I wanted to take this for our conversation is what makes Curt Cignetti so successful? Now, there's been a lot of point to the portal, but I mean, he doesn't have, if you look at recruit rankings, it's all 3-star below from high school, but even in transfer portal, it's not like he's been in the top 10 or 20 of the rankings of these guys, and so while he has used that one, and in many ways I want to broaden this isn't just Curt Cignetti, it's partly a question, what makes Nick Saban that, guys like Cignetti and maybe others, or Coach K or John Wooden from, if anybody's old enough to remember John Wooden.
You are.
I am. Yeah. Or Bill Parcells and way back when Vince Lombardi. But let's focus on Cignetti for the moment. I've read various things, people attribute to, we mentioned in our last podcast, who has these relatively short practices. He puts pressure. If you make 2 mistakes in practice, you're demoted. But on the other hand, he has these 5 a.m. off-season killer workouts. He started his initial press conference there with, I don't know exactly what the question was, but what makes you think you're going to do any, kind of bullish things? Well, I'm a winner. Well, every coach would say something similar to that. I mean, that thinking I'm going to win doesn't mean you're going to win. So this has been a long-standing interest of mine. I'll plug a book that, I'd like to sell 100 million copies, but I've sold 20. But 20 years ago, a book that kind of inspired our podcast name. It was called From the Ball Field to the Boardroom, focusing on managerial decisions. And one of the things I was getting at in a chapter of that book is it's very easy to suffer from what's referred to as the availability bias. The attributes that are most easily observed become the ones that you think, well, that's Vince Lombardi, chewing guys out. And so you have a whole generation of coaches who think, okay, I got to do that. But really often those most observable traits are not what really makes guys successful. So
I grew up in Indiana in the 80s playing basketball. What do you think I faced for 10 years? It was people screaming and yelling at me because they were Bob Knight disciples. So, yeah, it's not just the characteristics.
Everybody was a Bob Knight.
Right.
Whether or not you would coached under
It
him or
didn't
not.
matter.
I've
Yes.
seen him on TV. I'm
Right.
a disciple.
Right. I run the Bob Knight motion offense. No, you don't. You're just screaming at me.
Yes.
Yeah. Cignetti's, I don't want to step on anybody's feet here, but Cignetti's success, again, growing up in Indiana and knowing their unbelievable failure in the history of their football program, it's unbelievably shocking. I can't explain it, but the one thing I did hear them mention, and this was in the Big Ten championship game, they talked about how old his roster is at IU. And I went back and looked. They lead the nation in turnover margin, I think, and that goes back to your point of emphasizing that in practice. They're second in the nation in fewest penalty yards per game, and they're attributing a lot of that to they don't have an offensive starter under 21 years old. They have more sixth-year seniors than they do underclassmen on the roster, and I don't know if that's intentional or not, but somebody was comparing their average age on their roster to the Eagles' average age, and there's a 2.5 or 3 year difference between the Indiana average age and the Eagles. And again, this is kind of a 180 from what college athletics did for a long time. We're going to recruit a bunch of freshmen and sophomores and 5-stars and play them. And maybe it has partially to do with the fact that they're very disciplined because they're mature. They're grown-ups. They're playing, you've got guys on the line who have made, which is hard to believe now in college, you can make 60 starts as an offensive lineman or 55 starts as an offensive lineman. And you've been doing this with those guys for a number of years. That has to have some positive impact.
Yeah, look, I would love to go watch a Cignetti practice or a couple of days of practice. I mean, but we'd have loved to have done that with John Wooden or with Bill Self or that Williams guy at Carolina. But I'd love to go watch that. But so I don't know what Cignetti's magic formula is, but whenever you hear experts, and I think it was Nick Saban who said, it was Nick Saban, because he was talking about he was playing golf before the Alabama-Indiana game with some alumni or donors at Alabama, and they were talking about, we're playing Indiana, we should handle them no problem. And Nick Saban stopped, said, "What are you guys watching? This is the most fundamentally sound team. They are fundamental. So whatever it is you're supposed to do in football, they do very well. They're not flashy. They don't go over the top. They don't beat you in big ways type thing that are, necessarily, but they do everything small well.
They're sort of like a souped up service academy team. I was thinking of this. It's funny you mentioned that. I was thinking of this. I forgot now who Navy played in their bowl game, but I'm thinking, the Navies and Armies and Air Forces, it's not like they're not going to out-athlete hardly anybody. They're beating other teams by the very things you just mentioned. Yeah. But one of the things I wondered about, and you kind of alluded to it, Craig, is especially in college, you're playing the role of GM, even though now there are GMs.
Yeah, there are. Right.
But you're a talent evaluator. And Cignetti, look, when you're not getting the top guys from the portal, you're going to have to really, if you're going to be successful, sift through and ask, all right, I'm going to get the 22-year-old, but I need the 22-year-old who can play.
Right.
That putting me out there, that's not going to work.
It's not just high character guys. You got to get high character guys who can also perform.
Right.
So that makes your job a little bit more challenging as the general manager of your program, because when you bring guys in from the portal, it's a little more difficult to say, okay, we know they can play, but we also want to make sure they're high character.
And it's something I emphasize in my book. It's an interesting thing reading about Lombardi. I think one of the real underappreciated, and maybe his most valuable underappreciated skill, was player evaluation. That when he got to Green Bay, he watched their films and said, he wanted to figure out, who do I have? A guy, again, many people today wouldn't know the name of Paul Hornung, who had been a college Golden Boy Heisman winner, I think, if I remember right. But he was a nobody on Green Bay's roster. Well, Lombardi said, that guy can be my lead running back. That, and I think Saban is much the same way. Even Parcells, again, Parcells is a buster. He's killing people, and, sarcastic and cynical, and sometimes just outright mean. But Parcells, even when he might not have been GM, he really could evaluate guys. He could figure out, hey, Tony Romo is a guy worth keeping around, even if we're not going to start him this year. Kyle Shanahan had enough sense to say, or at least listen to his players. They're saying, this third string guy who's just in here, or fourth, fifth string guy we brought in just to be a arm in fall practice, this guy can play.
Well, he's from Iowa State. So.
Yeah, yes.
In spite of being from Iowa State,
all right,
he can still play.
The other thing is, and again, I think your point about mature players maybe makes this easier, but it's player development. Our buddy Chris Bielsi, who used to be on our podcast, I've still got to read this book. I don't know if you have, but the MVP machine, largely not just about the Dodgers, but largely about Dodger system and player development. It does amaze me that many places, and some of this has to do with the character of the player and their willingness to be developed. But player, again, at an IU of the world, you got to get guys who can be developed, because you're not getting guys who are just so superior athletes that you just show up out there. And so I think those kind of skills. The other thing I would point to, and we've talked about this a little bit, and Saban is the guy that really made me think about this. We went through an era in management education, a couple of decades ago. Don't micromanage. Well, no, you need to micromanage to the right extent. Nick Saban, coaches, especially those who are going to be coordinators on one side, I've never understood the idea, well, I'm going to coach the offense, you coach the defense, and I'm the head coach. Well, okay, I get you're doing that, but if you lose, yeah, you can fire that guy, but eventually you're going to get fired. For you to be successful, you got to be, and Nick Saban, while he might have been more involved in time on defense or offense, he was running the team. His coordinators were doing the things he wanted to do, or else they were going to change or be out. And even beyond that, he didn't just, I interact with coordinators. That's coaches. You just have to trust your coach. Well, to some extent, you have to delegate. But, he's out there coaching defensive backs. He's really good at that. And so he doesn't forget that, hey, I'm good at developing defensive backs. And so my sense is a guy like Cignetti at a place like Indiana, you're going to have to be, in fact, reading up on him. It was interesting, meeting with players, and he's telling them, hey, you need to put your hand here, not here. There is a level of involvement and engagement that I think is really important, because there's a reason you got to this level, because you know how to coach guys. And only becoming the CEO, that's not the best way to succeed. Well, anything else? Let me ask you before we move off the CFP. So, what are you guys' picks going forward?
Oh, good
here?
God!
We're so good at this.
Should there be a disclaimer? No betting on anything we say, because it's guaranteed to be wrong.
Bet opposite.
This might be
the
the George Costanza.
Yes,
do the opposite.
do the opposite.
Do the opposite.
I'm taking IU. I don't think Miami or Oregon can score enough to beat IU. I think Ole Miss can score enough to beat IU, but I don't think Ole Miss can stop IU. If Ole Miss scores 30, Indiana's going to score 50.
I take Indiana and Miami and Indiana to win it.
This is tough for me, because I've just historically so disliked Miami that it's hard to, look, their defense has been playing lights out. But in the game against A&M, A&M's offense have been a bit struggling. And
a bit?
Yeah. But one thing it does amaze me how much people don't really take weather, the media. Well, the wind's blowing today. Well, you still got to, both teams kind of stunk offensively in that game, because the wind was blowing 30 miles an hour.
It was one of the worst football games I've ever watched, as it turns out. It was terrible.
Now, their game, obviously, Ohio State has a good offense, but it's hard to tell how good, because other than the Texas game and then the IU game. The couple of games they played teams of somewhat equal ability, their offense didn't look so good. So it's hard to gauge how good Miami's defense is. I mean, my heart and maybe my head says IU. Let's see, Mississippi's playing Miami.
Mississippi's playing Miami.
That one, that's toss-up. I do not know.
I think Miami's defense is legit.
Yeah.
And their offense is good enough. And I think that's why they beat Ole Miss. But again, you should bet on Ole Miss at that point. Bet the farm on Ole Miss. And then I just think IU is better. I can't even believe I'm saying it. I just am shocked that I'm even watching it. But I watched
to beat
that.
Oregon at Oregon, to beat Ohio State, neutral site, to beat then Alabama badly, and even walking into Penn State.
It wasn't just that they beat Alabama badly. They made Alabama look like they quit. And I would never have thought. If anything will get DeBoer's fired at Alabama, that's the way of getting him fired. Make your team look like they quit on a field. Wow, I was just shocked by that.
No, you've got. I didn't put this on our agenda, but you raise a point here. Kalen DeBoer, one more year to prove himself, or will it be a James Franklin? You get blown out by Florida State again at the beginning of the year.
Then I'll go back to if that's the case, you need to fire him now.
Well,
don't do that.
Yeah.
You don't if you're worried about firing him after game 4 next year.
So you think Michigan's going? Glad we didn't get that guy up here because he was supposedly the number one candidate to get the Michigan job.
Look, I know the Alabama fans, like UK basketball fans, they tend to be hyper reactive, and because of that, then the media takes the road of, we're the level headed. I would say, I'm not such a big Alabama fan. Often I'm pulling against them. I'm thinking for 2 reasons. One, you missed playoffs last year. This year, not only to get beat, but your guy, you get swamped in this first game against Florida State. You don't look good against Georgia in the SEC championship. And then you get just hammered and it looks like your guy's quit. I think he's on a 1-year deal. Now, the thing is, kind of your point, I think the administration, there's no way we would fire him mid-season. Well, you show up like you did against FSU last year.
I know.
Or this year.
Yeah, they bookend the season with 2 losses that people are going to remember much more so than anything they did.
No, Alabama fans, obviously you have to beat Vanderbilt, but they don't care. The fact that you beat Vanderbilt doesn't get you some.
That's an expectation.
That's they did beat Alabama in the regular. They did some really good things in the regular season this year.
But
the Florida State thing last, right, and the Indiana thing lost. I mean, they did win the first round game as well.
But Oklahoma wasn't very good.
Right. And while they should have beaten Oklahoma in the regular season, they looked bad in losing to them.
Yeah.
Even though they had many chances to win that game, but they didn't look good in losing to them. It's just that when they lost this year, they actually looked really bad when they lost. Yeah. And so that'll get you run out of town, I think, in Alabama quicker than anything. I will go back to what you said about Michigan. I do think that they ended up with about as good a coaching hire as they could get in the end. Like, I don't know what would have been a better fit for Michigan than Whittingham.
Whittingham.
Yeah. I just think that's a really good, because I think they're just looking for a gap, maybe a 5-6 year window to put the program back kind of in a, I don't know, more upstanding situation. I think he'll do that. And
a 4-year no nonsense guy is what they need.
Yeah, that doesn't have. They're not getting media coverage for other stuff. And so if they can do that for 4 to 5 years and be competitive, maybe in that 4 to 5, knock off Ohio State once or twice, then he'll have done a fantastic job at Michigan. And I am not a Michigan apologist. So
on the coaching carousel at the pro level, I think many were surprised that John Harbaugh was fired. It's an interesting thing. I mean, obviously, John Harbaugh is a very good coach. I mean, there's no arguing with his record. But do you see this maybe, and other examples, I've got a couple of time, but examples of where, sometimes teams and coaches can both benefit from new venues.
The old change of scenery.
Yeah, I'm thinking Andy Reid. I mean, Andy Reid did a very, very good job in Philly. His last year wasn't good, but in the end, obviously he and the Chiefs benefited. But it's not like Philadelphia has done terribly in the 14 years or however many he's been gone. That you can, guys can become a bit stale where they are, whether that's in the selection of coordinators or in evaluating their own methods or just maybe the personnel that they wind up with. I mean, look, Lamar Jackson, we've talked about, in many ways, Lamar Jackson is a fantastic player, but he is injury prone, and that leads to issues. I mean,
well, this goes back to the Brady Belichick type thing. Is Lamar Jackson nearly the guy he is? I mean, he came out of college, skinny kid with a decent arm, incredibly athletic. If he doesn't go to the right system, i.e. Harbaugh doesn't use him the right way in Baltimore, does he still become multiple-time MVP Lamar Jackson? And I don't know the answer to this, don't get me wrong, but I think the combination worked well. Now, can that combination grow old and stale and, okay, we got to change something, and somebody picks Jackson over Harbaugh? I don't know that that's what happens. There's rumors that that's what's happened, but maybe. It doesn't seem, the idea of it gets stale in college doesn't seem to be quite the same to me because there's enough roster turnover. But the idea that if you lose the locker room at the professional level, then the coach has got to go.
Yeah, because you can't get rid of.
Yeah, you can't change over the whole entire roster.
Right.
In college, you can do that now in a year.
Right.
But you can't do that in the pros.
At least in some special circumstances in college, you can see Jock Calipari, I think, would be a good example. I think he needed a new. I think he's helped Arkansas, and yet I think
it's done wonders for.
Kentucky. Yeah. This definitely wasn't my radar here, but since we live in Kentucky, I'm not some big Kentucky fan, but Dennis went to Kentucky, and I think you grew up, even though you grew up in Indiana, you
grew up a Kentucky fan.
The Kentucky job really takes a special person. You got to be a very good coach, but you also get handling the situation and handling elite players, guys that are likely to be NBA guys. The Mark Pope thing, I mean, I wanted the guy to succeed. I'm not sure it's looking like whether he stays on, let's say Pope is there another year or two, who do you think would be a guy that could fill those shoes? Maybe not do what Calipari did those first few years at that level. I'm not sure he can do that now. But
10 years ago, I would have said Billy Donovan was the perfect coach for Kentucky. If he would have left Florida after a couple national titles, he had the national prominence in terms of the recruiting ability to do what he needed to do. But once he went to the NBA and now he's been there long enough, I don't think he has the name recognition to come back anymore. I don't know at this point as far as many college guys that I would say are perfectly suited to step into Kentucky. Pope had the magic of being a former player for one of their magic runs that most of the people who are fans now remember. So he's got that magic potion from that time, and they're already ready to get rid of him. I mean, he's had a year and not even half of a season this year, and they are across the board ready for him to be fired. So I don't know that there's Dennis and I've talked about this before. I've never been a huge fan of hiring somebody just because they're one of us. I don't agree with well, you have to hire somebody from this program, from this background, somebody who's one of us. And I think that has hindered Kentucky at this point.
Yeah, people that aren't around Kentucky don't fully understand what Kentucky basketball is. And to be the coach there, you can think of the two guys that have had long, successful runs recently. And I mean, you can go back to Adolph Rupp if you want to, but Pitino and Calipari. And those two guys had one big thing in common with each other, and that is they had egos that would fill any stadium they were in. And I think having that ego becomes incredibly important. And so you have to have that kind of ego, in part because with a little bit of success and that ego, Kentucky fans will get behind you in such a way because they almost, a little overstated, but almost want to worship their basketball coach. And who has that kind of ego? Well, Billy Donovan was pretty close to it.
Right.
I don't know who that is.
You can't be self-examining. You can't be self-doubting.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the thing about Mark Pope, and I here's the thing, is he is such a good guy.
Yeah.
You will not have a better coach as a person than Mark Pope. But does Mark Pope have an ego that fills the room? No, because he's such a humble, genuine, good guy. He's the guy you would want to hang out with. He's the guy you wouldn't mind introducing your daughter to, type thing. Mm-hmm. You want Pitino and Calipari to be you want to introduce your daughter to them? I don't know, but
well, and I think it's important too. Pitino and Calipari built their egos outside of Kentucky.
Yeah.
So when they walked into Kentucky,
they had the ego already.
Already. And when the Kentucky fans said, you're not worthy of us, Pitino and Calipari could both say, you're not worthy of me.
Yeah, like, what are you talking about?
Why would you think I'm not legitimate for this job? Yes. If anything, I'm stepping away from whatever NBA job I could be doing to come coach at Kentucky. So there had to be some give and take there. Pope doesn't, to his credit, has none of that. He's walking back into a situation, and I hate to say it, but I think that might be his downfall. He cares about that job so much, it's going to mentally destroy.
Well, and we've said this before. He's a different personality, but Tubby Smith, Billy Gillespie, Mark Pope were much better suited for the places they came from than they were for. I mean, you got it, like you said.
Tubby Smith, again, I happened to run across the guy a couple of times. Couldn't have been a better guy. Just a fantastic guy, in my opinion, in my brief interactions with him, type thing. Just a great guy. The problem is, did he have an ego that filled a stadium?
Right.
Nope.
Perfect person to coach UK basketball is Lane Kiffin.
Yes.
I don't know how you could find a better college coach. No. They're not a better college. I'm not going to go into anything about what's going on right now.
Well, part of it is, too, not only dealing with the negative, but you also got to be able to deal with positive. Yeah. You've got to gain juice from all the attention. I mean, these guys you're talking about, they love that. That to them, that wasn't a distraction. That was part of the appeal. Yeah. The Tubby Smiths of the world, that's a distraction.
They wanted to be basketball and good guys and care about their players and everything else. Calipari wanted to, hey, I'll help you guys out. I'll build you up and everything, as long as it builds me up as well.
I think we see it year after year. There are a lot of really good college football coaches, a lot of really good college basketball coaches that just can't handle the general manager aspect of the job. Yeah. They are fantastic X's and O's guys. They might be the guys who, like you said with Saban, they can do the in-practice coaching. They can do the technique stuff. They can't handle the general manager aspect of it, of the responsibilities beyond being on the field.
Well, you see this in the NFL, guys that are really good coordinators, but being a good coordinator doesn't mean you're going to be a good head coach.
I've got the coach for Kentucky.
I just thought of one.
Bruce Pearl is the head coach for Kentucky. He would fit right now. If they're looking for a 4 or 5 year guy, he's your guy.
They're never going to get him away, but Bobby Hurley would be the guy I was thinking of.
I'm always getting scolded for this, but Craig has history at Southern Indiana with Bruce Pearl.
Correct.
Maybe you could get him to come on.
But he does. That's part of the ego type thing.
I think he would have the ability to walk in the door. And being in the SEC and being successful at Auburn, I think UK fans would begrudgingly give him credit of saying, okay, this is somebody who can do the job.
Yeah, I think you're right.
One last quick topic, just as a caveat. Dennis will act like he knows nothing about this because it's baseball. But Craig suggested, but that's really not really true. Often Dennis knows more than I do, and I think I follow the sport. But
not about the topic you're about to mention. I got zero.
But Craig brought up, all right, who are the free agents still out there?
Bichette, Bregman. The pitcher for the Astros, I believe, Valdez has not signed yet.
Bellinger.
Kyle Tucker, Bellinger, none of those guys have signed yet.
So what's the holdup on these guys?
I might not have suggested this. Are these guys all Boris clients? Is that why they're all waiting? That there might be an easier explanation for this than I actually realized. But if some of them are Boris clients, he's made a history now of trying to hold out as long as possible to try to get these guys the best deal. I think he did that with Blake Snell last year, the year before.
I'm pretty sure Breck was Boris.
So I would assume a couple of these guys are.
Tucker is too.
But it's completely different. There used to be the guys at the top of the market, and I don't know if the NHL is the same way, but the guys at the top had 3 or 4 offers early on. They picked the best offer, and then it filled in. They set the market, and it filled in below. It's not happening in baseball. And I don't understand how you can expect to get a better deal by continually allowing other teams to be out of the market. Once they sign a couple guys, they're not going to spend more money. So maybe they're all playing the Dodgers, Yankees, and Red Sox and Mets against each other, and that's their way.
Now, the difference in the other leagues, say the NHL and the NBA or something like that, the reason the market has to clear for the big guys is because they got cap issues.
Right.
Major League Baseball doesn't have the same cap issues. And so
that's a good point.
Yeah, delaying this might be possible in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
It is, again, this topic for more discussion later, but our buddy Chris is, a big Mets fan. And it's been funny. I kind of needled him over the years. I said, most Mets fans seem to
kind of needled him.
we all have.
Most Mets fans love Pete Alonso. Chris has always been sort of poor about, well, yeah, he's not good for it. Well, Pete Alonso has been as good of a hitter over the last 6 years as anybody in baseball. And yet they let him go. And they're going to fill his role, for a salary that, what Baltimore's paying him isn't so outlandish. And the beef against him is that, well, one, he's sort of older than Juan Soto, but he's not real good defensively. Maybe at times worse than not. But it's no, he works hard at defense, and he turned himself into, especially on receiving the ball, a serviceable first baseman. Juan Soto, look, if there's anything that makes me want to pull against the Mets, is Juan Soto. The kind of guy who hits near homers and they turn into singles, and who's unwilling to DH, even though he's the worst. It's the elephant in the David Stearns GM room. You've got a guy you're letting go because you want to upgrade your defense, but you got the worst right fielder in the league, but you can't do anything about him because you're paying him $50 million a year, and he's your guy. And so it's kind of interesting. They let Diaz go to the Dodgers. I mean, clearly in one way, Stearns seems to be saying, all right, I'm going to build my team. These were guys that were holdovers. I'm going to put it all on Soto, and then I'm going to pull it. And then I'm going to do the Brewers thing, kind of filling, which he was successful there. It'll be interesting. The trouble with them and Kyle Tucker is, well, Kyle Tucker's a right fielder. Somebody's going to have to move out of their natural position. So, there's been linkage to them and Bregman. But I'm thinking if the Mets were really going to sign those guys, wouldn't they have signed them already?
I would think so.
Might have been the Boris issue.
Right.
Right.
It does bring back what you're talking about, though, with the lack of a cap, the Mets not extending Alonso, at least a competitive offer from what Baltimore extended, doesn't make a lot of sense. You've got plenty of money in the Mets organization. It's not like they don't have the money to spend, and they let him leave for a contract that was pretty average in terms of value. Schwarber got a deal that was basically $1 million less per year than what Alonso got, and Alonso at least plays the field. Schwarber doesn't. So it was surprising that they didn't make a better effort, knowing we don't have a cap, we've got the money to spend, that they didn't make an effort to bring him back.
Yeah, it strikes me as a way to really get honest with you. Look, if you win, fans won't care.
Right.
But if you lose, and you lose by ditching your most beloved players, that will only amplify the bad will. Look, you don't keep guys on just for sentiment, but a Pete Alonso isn't just a sentiment hire. The guy can hit. Now, again, whether his bat, he's old enough that maybe his bat slows down in the next couple of years, but he had a big, I forgot to sign maybe 4 years.
I thought he did the did Schwarber do 5,150, and I thought Alonso did 5,155.
That may be
So I
right.
think he got just a few more million than Schwarber did.
All right.
But I'm going to go back.
Punch did us. He's followed us.
No, I'm thinking it's the length of contracts. This is a big thing in the NHL too that always bothers me is that the length of contracts, especially at age. That this is. So I was about to ask, how long did they sign these guys for?
I think they both signed for 5 years.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to go back. Chris and I did.
Soto for like
Yeah.
35 years.
Right.
It's,
Chris and I did have a conversation right at the end of the semester 2 months ago where he said he actually has come to the point where he enjoys watching Alonso waddle around at first base.
Okay,
So he does have some sentimental value for Pete Alonso.
I'm being
Yes.
harsh.
Yes.
Chris doesn't hate Pete Alonso, but he doesn't. He's like I said. Anytime I brought him up, he was always sort of downgrading his value.
Yeah, I think he begrudgingly admitted he would be disappointed if he was not a Met any longer.
We may have to have him on and we can give him equal time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully this won't be our only video. And if you're just listening, please keep listening.